right, tonight, if you're in Pasadena, I want to give you a heads up on a really good event that's going on in your area. U.S. Tour of Duty presents something called Real Intelligence. What is it? It's Scott Ritter. He has written a new book called Waging Peace, and I read a synopsis of the book. I haven't read the book. The last book I read by him was Target Iran, which was just devastatingly frightening. This one is about organizing the peace movements, using the art of war for peaceful organization, understanding your enemy. You know what I'm saying? And wage peace in an organized, meaningful manner. And I have to agree with him that, there are some great people out there doing amazing things, but we're not completely organized. So I welcome the opportunity to tell you that he'll be at the Women's Club of South Pasadena on Fremont Avenue in South Pasadena, California. We'll post all the information on the website so you can go see him tonight at 7:30. Hi, Scott.
Hey, how are you doing?
I'm well. I feel, a little at odds here because I usually don't, interview anybody without reading their book, but this is so new I haven't had a chance, and I don't even know if it's out. So explain what's in it and why you finally said, you know what, they're not organized. We have to organize it.
Well, I've been saying it for a while, actually. Last year I wrote an article with the working title, The Art of War for the Anti-War Movement.
Yeah.
And I basically said that we don't have a viable anti-war movement. We have a lot of people who are anti-war.
Yeah.
We have a lot of people who are frustrated by the war in Iraq. But I got tired of hearing people say, look at the poll numbers. This proves that, what we're doing is working. More Americans are against the war today than ever before. This proves that, these demonstrations and all this, unorganized rhetoric is actually having an impact. And I responded by saying all it proves is that the American people are against losing. They're not anti-war. They're just against losing this war. If we had gone into Iraq, toppled Saddam, and everything came up smelling like roses, the majority of the American people would say, what a great thing we did. It doesn't matter that we lied about WMD, violated international law,
You're right.
et cetera. So, that's the point I make with the anti-war movement is America's not anti-war. We're just anti-getting our butt kicked in Iraq, and people want to get out of Iraq. But the danger with the anti-war movement, buying into these numbers is somehow certifying their success, is that it doesn't deal with the underlying symptoms of the reality of the pro-war character of America today, meaning that if we think just because Americans have turned on Iraq, they're not going to support a war in Iran, we're wrong. The American people are, and their politicians in the American system is gearing up for a war with Iran. And this is the point I say that, we truly, if you want to be the anti-war movement, all I have to do is look at the scoreboard and I see pro-war 60, anti-war movement 0. We're late in the fourth quarter, time's running out, and we don't have a plan. And I wrote this article. It got a lot of criticism.
I read that article, and I liked it. I thought it was smart, and I thought it was necessary.
And so what I did is expanded on it. I said, okay, people said, great, Ritter, you've identified a problem. What's your solution?
Yeah.
And being a former Marine, I'm somebody who, doesn't put a problem on the table unless you have a solution. And the solution, I said, is to comprehend the reality that today we are engaged in an ideological death match with the pro-war forces here in America today. And there are pro-war forces. We have the military-industrial complex.
Exactly.
Eisenhower warned us when he first spoke of it. He said the military-industrial congressional complex. He was forced politically to remove congressional, but that's a reality. Congress is caved in. We have a nation that's geared towards war. And so we need to recognize that those of us, and I count myself part of the anti-war movement, part of the progressive peace and justice movement, we need to recognize we are in a life and death struggle. This is war. And we need to wage war.
And the crazy thing is, we're now fighting billionaires. That's what we're fighting against. We're fighting against defense contractors and defense interests that are, when I see things like 70% of our intelligence budget, which, I don't know what the number is because nobody can know. But there was somebody concerned enough inside of the CIA who came forward and said, I just want people to know that 70% of the allocated budget for intel gathering and analysis is being spent with private industry. Now, who are they loyal to, company or country?
Well, that's 100% correct. And this is one of the points I make, in the book, and I've made in arguments. You and I have talked about this before. What's really happening here, when we speak of the rise of the military-industrial complex, and I'll throw in congressional complex because I feel Congress is sold out, what we're saying is that force which counters it, and I'll call it citizenship, the power of we the people, isn't there. The majority of Americans have disengaged from the notion of civic responsibility, active engagement in the processes of citizenship that makes for good governance. If we pull back, and we have, one only has to take a look at the pathetic participation figures when we have a national election. When we pull back, that doesn't mean the system goes away. It means other elements will step into the vacuum our non-participation has created and take over. And that's what's happened. Special interests have moved in. We need to get engaged. We need to get engaged nationally. One of the things I point out in the book is that every movement needs a center of gravity, that which defines it. And I have a hard time with the current way the anti-war movement, peace and justice movement describes itself, figuring out what exactly they stand for. And so I put forward a simple idea. How about standing for America? Meaning the Constitution, the rule of law, that which defines who we are and what we are as a people. Because if we're going to have an ideological war in America, we need to win. And we win by bringing on board more people than the other side, more Americans. So we need a definition of who we are that can be readily embraced by the majority of Americans, hopefully all Americans. And if you define yourself in terms of the Constitution, in terms of the rule of law, how pro-American is that? That is the most pro-American thing out there. But I found that, unfortunately, many people in the progressive side of the body politic here in America, when you throw out Constitution, they go, well, that's baseball, hot dogs, apple pie, and Chevrolet. You're just buying into the system, man. No, I'm not. The Constitution is the system, nothing else. The Constitution is that which makes America great. And if you're not for the Constitution, frankly speaking, you're anti-American.
Well, I agree with you, and I a head of party, and I've said this a million times, a head of party, which, that's a choice you get to make after the Constitution is upheld. You don't get to make that before the Constitution is upheld, and it's not made for you, that choice in the Constitution. In fact, the Constitution doesn't speak of party. So to ignore the Constitution is to ignore your luxury to choose a party or not to choose a party. But you can't ignore your obligation under your constitutional obligation to citizenship, which it's a duty. And it's funny because you served much more intensely and honorably. I won't say